Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Have you ever felt totally backed into a corner by your circumstances, or maybe even trapped by your own unyielding principles? Well, today we are unpacking the fascinating contrast between two incredibly intelligent men who find themselves utterly cornered, Eddard Stark and Tyrion Lannister. Both of these men are very literal prisoners in this narrative, but the cages that hold them and the weapons they use to try and break free could not be more different. So let's take a close look at how a man bound strictly by honor and a man armed with absolutely nothing but his wit navigate their captivity.
We kick things off with a haunting fever dream. Imagine a long fallen round tower with the red mountains of Dorne at its back and three Kingsguard knights standing there, white cloaks blowing in the wind. This brilliantly captures the heavy, inescapable burden of Ned Stark's past. Ned is unconscious, trapped in a fevered sleep, forced to revisit a trauma he's carried for years. The faces of those three knights burn crystal clear in his memory. Fierce old Sir Gerald Hightower, Sir Oswald Went sharpening his blade, and Sir Arthur Dayne with a sad smile, drawing his greatsword Dawn, a blade pale as milk glass and literally alive with light. It perfectly sets the stage for a tragic, inescapable confrontation that still holds Ned prisoner in his own mind.
What's really fascinating here is the sheer imbalance of this legendary skirmish. In the dream, just like in life, Ned's 7 loyal companions, guys like proud Martin Castle, faithful Theo Wool, and the chronicman Howland Reed, face off against 3 of the realm's deadliest knights. But the years have leached away the faces of Ned's friends. Now they just ride beside him as mere shadows, gray wraiths on horses made of mist. The Kingsguard, though, they are vivid. They refuse to flee with the Queen, refuse to bend the knee at Storm's End, simply because they swore a vow. The Kingsguard does not flee, they tell him. It's a stark reminder that rigid honor, on both sides, locked them into a brutal clash where 7 fought 3, and only 2 rode away.
As the dream reaches its violent climax, in a rush of steel and shadow, Ned hears his sister, Lyanna, screaming his name. A storm of rose petals blows across a blood-streaked sky that is as blue as the eyes of death. He finds her in her bed of blood, and her voice echoes until it fades into his desperate, whispered reply, "I promise." This single vow anchors Ned. Even in his sleep, he is an absolute captive to this painful, honorable past. He wakes up groaning in the dark, the echo of that promise literally pulling him back into a waking nightmare. So, let's step into his waking reality. Ned has been lost to the milk of the poppy for 6 days and 7 nights. When he finally opens his eyes, he's physically incapacitated, weak as a kitten, his legs splinted and plastered, with a dull, constant throb of pain shooting up his side. His steward, Vayon Poole, brings him water that tastes as sweet as honey to his cracked lips. But the political chaos hasn't waited for him to heal. He learns from his guard captain, Alan, that the Kingslayer has already fled the city for Casterly Rock, and his youngest daughter, Arya, is consumed by a silent, fierce anger. And to make matters worse, King Robert has left strict orders to see him immediately. As Ned knows all too well, Robert Baratheon isn't exactly known for his patience. The crucial takeaway here is that King Robert has lost all appetite for actual justice. The street fight orchestrated by Jaime Lannister left dead men from 3 different factions, a truly bloody tally. But Robert just brushes past this entirely. Flushed with anger, he simply demands peace between the warring houses, shutting Ned down when he tries to defend his butchered men. In a horrifying display of his temper, the king even delivers a vicious backhand blow to his own queen, Cersei, right there in the room. It's shockingly clear that true justice is completely off the table, further trapping Ned in a corrupted system. Trapped by his physical injuries, and by a king who uses violence to silence his own wife, Ned finds himself a paralyzed prisoner of his own office. He actually tries to resign, telling Robert he wants to return to Winterfell. But Robert pulls the heavy silver hand clasp from his cloak and literally tosses it onto Ned's bed, flat out forbidding him to leave. With a shattered leg and the inescapable weight of his duties, Ned is rendered as helpless as a child, held captive in a plush but stifling room. His own rigid sense of duty has entirely boxed him in. Now let's contrast Ned's luxurious but stifling captivity in the Red Keep with Tyrion Lannister, who is currently facing a very literal drop of 600 feet of empty air. Up in the Eyrie's infamous sky cells, there are no iron bars, there are no heavy doors. There is just a sloping floor that ends abruptly at the edge of a horrifying abyss. It's a freezing, wind-screaming honeycomb carved right into the stone where prisoners are entirely welcome to escape at will, by simply stepping off into the terrifying void. But this terrifying environment brilliantly showcases Tyrion's greatest weapon, a mind that absolutely refuses to be cowed. When he was first hauled before Lysa Arryn and her rheumy-eyed, twitching 6-year-old son, Tyrion completely refused to give them the satisfaction of his fear. When Lysa boasted that the Eyrie was impregnable, Tyrion sarcastically shot right back that it was merely inconvenient. Even though his stunted legs failed him on the agonizing climb up, and he stood surrounded by enemies in a cold marble hall, Tyrion's sharp tongue and defiantly theatrical intellect remained completely unchained.
Of course, bravado only gets you so far, and the reality of the Sky Cell is a nightmare. The slope of the floor is pure psychological torture. Tyrion is terrified to even close his eyes, worried he might roll over in his sleep and slide off the edge. He actually finds chilling final words written in blood on the wall from a past tenant. "God save me, the blue is calling." Tyrion realizes that if he stays in this wind-battered cell, relying on a jailer who delights in starving him, he is going to slip into madness. He knows he has to stop waiting and start strategically weaponizing his perceived weaknesses to survive.
So, to engineer his escape, he carefully manipulates his brutal jailer, Mord, executing a brilliantly cunning sequence of events. First, he takes brutal strikes from Mord's heavy leather strap, scrambling backward like a crab but forcing himself to smile to deny Mord any satisfaction. Second, he exploits the turnkey's immense greed, promising him vast quantities of Casterly Rock gold, enough to make a peasant a lord. Finally, once he has Mord fully on the hook, he springs the trap. He demands to send a message to Lysa Arryn, claiming he wishes to, quote, confess his crimes.
And it works like a charm. He is brought into the torchlit high hall before all the lords of the Vale. But standing there, Tyrion turns the tables. Instead of admitting to the assassinations they suspect him of, he delivers this wildly sarcastic confession. He proudly lists his actual crimes, mocking his captors right to their faces. He goes on about lying with whores, cheating at dice, and maliciously insulting noble lords. He turns a deadly serious interrogation into an utter theatrical farce, drawing outright laughter from the crowd and completely infuriating Lysa Arryn.
When Lysa angrily threatens to throw him right back into an even steeper sky cell, Tyrion expertly springs his ultimate trap. He roars at them, demanding to know if honor stops at the bloody gate. Bypassing the farcical justice of a little boy who just wants to see men fly out the moon door, Tyrion invokes the king's ancient laws. He demands a trial by combat. This is a brilliant strategic move, pitting his wit against their supposed honor. By weaponizing their own rigid laws against them, he corners Lysa Arryn in front of all her bannermen. She literally has no choice but to accept.
Now, what's truly revealing here is the reaction from the Lords of the Vale. A dozen strange men immediately step forward, clamoring for the chance to kill a dwarf. Everyone from a young knight of the Green Viper to the gout-ridden Lord Hunter begs for the honor of fighting Tyrion. It's a deeply disheartening moment where Tyrion realizes just how eager these supposedly righteous men are to slaughter him. Ultimately, Lady Lysa selects her late husband's captain of the guard, the square-jawed, silver-haired Ser Vardis Egan.
But even the chosen executioner feels the deep dishonor in this incredibly uneven fight. Ser Vardis literally sinks to one knee and begs Lysa to give the burden to someone else. He points out that Tyrion is half his size and lame in the legs, emphasizing how the honorable Vale is acting absolutely no better than the assassins they despise. Ser Vardis calls it exactly what it is, a shameful slaughter, not justice. But Lysa, petty and cruel, refuses to listen to reason. When Tyrion asks for his brother Jaime to stand for him, Lysa swiftly denies it, noting the Kingslayer is hundreds of leagues away. She leaves Tyrion hobbling and bruised, throwing a desperate plea into a massive room full of enemies. She mockingly tells him to name a champion, if he thinks he can find a man willing to die for him. For a long, incredibly tense moment, the vast hall is completely, utterly silent. It genuinely looks as though Tyrion's brilliant maneuver has ended in a colossal, fatal blunder. But then, a stirring in the rear of the chamber changes everything, as the mercenary Bronn steps from the shadows and calls out, "I'll stand for the dwarf." So, as we wrap up this explainer, we are left to ponder this. We saw Ned Stark, a good and honorable man, utterly paralyzed by past vows and physically trapped by a volatile king. On the flip side, Tyrion Lannister, stripped of all protection, used his low cunning, his gold, and his ruthless intellect to fight his way out of a cell in the sky. It leaves us wondering, in a world where the righteous are so easily trapped, when honor completely fails to protect you, what are you willing to weaponize to survive?